Hello everyone, my name is Rob Webb and welcome to this first video in my series on how I create my images in my front room. For this week we're going to be looking at the theme Tabletop Photography. I'm going to take you through the concept of the image, some of the equipment I used to create it, and also some of the processing involved at the end. So without further ado, let's get cracking. So the first item on the equipment list is obviously the camera body. This is my Canon 5D Mark III with a 24-105L lens. We're in manual mode, shooting at f7.1 at 1/60th of a second, ISO 200. We've also got a shutter release cable plugged in just to make it easier while we're shooting. On top, in the hot shoe, is the Godox flash transmitter. And now some of the supporting equipment. Here we have a flash stand, on which is a flexible reflector mount and a round reflector. Now this isn't actually set to the reflective side, it's set to the black side, and it's purely there to push back the smoke from the smoke machine that's here. The tabletop itself, or rather the table that the tabletop is sitting on, is a DIY workbench. This is a great sturdy workbench for this kind of shot. It creates a nice solid platform to work with. On top is a glass kitchen splashback that you put behind your cooker normally. This creates a really nice reflective surface. It's nice and easy to clean, and it's pretty tough as well, although I wouldn't want to drop it. Our subjects for this shot are a bottle of JD, Gentleman Jack, only the best, a glass with some fake ice cubes in, and some whiskey. If things go well, I will be drinking the whiskey. The final piece of equipment that we'll talk about is the flash unit itself. This is a Godox AD180, up here mounted in the boom. Down here is its battery pack. This will also have fitted this small reflector, inside of which will be a honeycomb grid. On top of that, we'll have this flash gel, which will be mounted in this ring on top of the reflector itself, like so. That's just to create a little bit of colour cast across the scene in the smoke. Currently, this flash is set to 1/16th. I think that'll be a good level to start with the camera at 7.1. So, now we're going to take a couple of shots. Not of the whiskey yet. So the idea behind this shot is quite a simple one. We're using the flash up there to illuminate the smoke. Now one of the effects of smoke is it diffuses the light. So that actually gives you a slightly greater exposure, or a slightly brighter exposure on your subjects than you would normally have with the same amount of flash power, particularly when you're shooting above and directly down. Because the light diffuses through the smoke, you end up with a much more evenly lit subject. So what we're going to do is I'm going to release some smoke. I have a little release mechanism here, and I'm going to take some shots firing through the smoke as it's released. Whether you'll still be able to see me with the smoke we'll find out. So I'm going to keep taking shots as the smoke comes through. The thing with photographing smoke is that it's random, so you can never tell what you're going to get. So the best way to tackle this problem is to keep taking shots. Now as you can see, we're going to fill up with smoke fairly quickly here. So one thing I may do in a second is open the window. Otherwise, you ain't going to be able to see me. Okay, so as you can see, I've opened the French windows out into the conservatory to let a bit of the smoke out when it's cleared a little bit, so hopefully you can see me again. Now you may be wondering, does having that much light coming through near the subject actually change the exposure? And the answer is no, not really, because it's not actually that much light in the grand scheme of things. We're shooting at 7.1, as I said, so if I was to shoot without the flash on, we would get a totally black scene. In fact, I can demonstrate that now by switching the transmitter off and taking the shot. And as you can see, that is a totally blank shot. I'll just switch it back on. So now with the curtain open and the French doors open, hopefully we'll get a little bit less smoke floating around in the air and a bit more over on the subjects. I'm going to take a couple more shots and then we'll talk about the actual technicalities of why I wanted to shoot this shot and then go on to some processing. So now we should have some decent shots in there, hopefully. We'll go over to the computer in a minute and we'll do some processing. We'll look at how we can enhance the smoke, the texture and detail in the smoke, how we can get rid of some of the imperfections and dust that inevitably collect on reflective surfaces. It's really difficult to keep them even slightly clean, so you do have to look at in Photoshop how you get rid of all of those little dust specks. But I wanted first to have a kind of 30 seconds of thinking about why I chose this shot, why I chose to shoot it in this way for tabletop photography. And it basically came down to these fake ice cubes on Amazon were on offer, and I wanted to buy some for photography purposes, and I started to think about how whiskey was always sold traditionally and where it was drunk traditionally, that seedy whiskey joints with the smoke and the darkness and just the drama of that kind of environment. And that got me thinking about how I could recreate that kind of scene but still present it as a product photo. So the idea to shoot top down, lighting from above, that's kind of, most of these whiskey joints would have been lit by lighting from above. It would have been quite spotlighty, which is what this effect produces. It would have been smoky because of the people smoking their cigars and their cigarettes. And that kind of feel is what I wanted to produce. Now you could say, well, what's the reflective bit? You'd be quite right. I just think that that adds a little bit more drama to the shot rather than another kind of surface. Maybe wood would have worked, some nice deep dark grained wood, but I think the reflective surface for now is what I wanted to shoot.
So here we are in Lightroom, and the first thing you're going to notice is that's a different Jack Daniels bottle. When I came to import the images that I took while I was recording the video, I felt that there was something that didn't quite work with the Gentleman Jack bottle. I'm not quite sure what it was. Maybe the fact that it was more glass and the black label of the original number 7 JD just works a little bit better with this light and the contrast, etc, etc. But so after I'd finished recording, I took some more shots using the different JD bottle. I only have 2 bottles of JD before anybody thinks I'm a total alcoholic. So what we're going to do now is start to look at the processing techniques around this image, start to think about how we can tidy it up, how we can enhance it. So first of all in Lightroom, I think the first thing to do, as Gavin Hoey always does, is to hit the contrast slider, because that's just the one that will make the biggest difference in this type of shot. So we're just going to bring it over ever so slightly, and you can see immediately that the blue of the curtain behind the shot starts to disappear into black. Not so much over here where you can still see the edge of it, but certainly on this side. We're also going to hit the clarity slider, because that will bring out the swirls and the aspect of the smoke really nicely, so you can really start to see down here and where you've got the curls coming in that there's some really nice waves in that smoke just brushing past the bottle there. So now we've done the contrast and the clarity, I think we should have a look at addressing this side of the image. I think the easiest way to tackle that is with a graduated filter. That's roughly where I want it to start with, taking the saturation and taking the exposure down. So if we just drag in from the side, bring it across till we start to lose the blue, and maybe a little bit more exposure off from the ends, just to kind of make the smoke disappear off the edge of the image. Yeah, I think that looks probably where we want it to be. We also have this area up at the top here, which I think we can also maybe look at with a graduated filter. So once again, we'll drag down and we'll just really take that down now, just to get rid of that little wisp of smoke that was up there. Now it's possible later on we'll look at cropping this square and maybe this whole side will go anyway, but for now I think that's a good start with the cleanup up there. So we should have a quick look at the other sliders now. Now one thing I think might work is to make this smoke slightly oranger, just by pulling it across. I think we don't want to go too far, and that probably is too far. Quite a delicate little balancing act there. We'll go for there for now. Now with the other sliders, blacks want to come down a bit, but not too much. Whites don't actually need that much moving by the looks of it at all. We might bring them down a little bit as well. Shadows are the same. We don't want to go too far here because we start to lose the smoke into the shadows and lose the whole effect. Highlights, there aren't that many highlights, but perhaps just taking it down just to there to take that blur out of the centre, just so you can start to see the bottle a bit more. So I think that actually the next thing I want to do is just to bring the crop tool in and just crop it ever so slightly with proportions constrained, just to bring it in to start with to there. Now the next part is to take this into Photoshop. So here we are in Photoshop, and the first thing to do is to get rid of the padlock on the layer because we want to edit this directly. Now as you can see, there was a lot of dust that collected on the glass that really shows up when you look at it at this kind of detail, and the easiest way to deal with that is just to get a paintbrush, make sure you've got black as your foreground colour, and we can probably make it quite hard here. Get it to a sensible size, maybe a bit smaller, and we'll just paint out all of those areas where there was a lot of smokiness. Now let's take this hardness right down now, because what we want to do is not leave hard edges. Let's come out and see how that looks. So I think that's a good starting point. So now we need to tackle the actual bits that are in the smoke. Now these you can't do very easily with a paintbrush unless you're much better at Photoshop than I am, but this is where the magic of the spot healing brush comes to the fore. So we want it reasonably small. We only want to be picking up individual pieces at a time if we can, and we're just going to go through and knock out these individual spots. Now this is going to take a long time, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the video and come back to you once it's done. As you can see, I've now gone through and removed all the little specks and all the little imperfections that were captured on the surface of that reflective material. You're always going to get some of those. It's very, very difficult to keep any kind of surface clean enough that with a flash and this kind of lighting and this kind of high contrast reflective surface that you don't have some cleanup to do in post-processing. You don't want to go too mad with it. It starts to look a little bit wrong if there's nothing there at all for those little imperfections to be seen, and you start to lose some of the detail as well. But for now I think I've done enough with that, so I'm going to do some sharpening of this image just to make it a bit more clear. There's a way I like to do that, and I'll show you that now. To start, we're going to duplicate this layer. So you can do that in any number of ways. You can go up to layer and duplicate it from there, or you can just do Control J or Command J, I believe it is on a Mac, and you get another layer. Now we're going to create a folder, and we're going to drag that layer into the folder. Then we're going to duplicate it again, and we're going to set the blend mode of this folder to overlay. Now that's going to make this go dark, like that. Then we're going to set this top layer to have its blend mode of vivid light, and this is going to make it go really dark. Now the trick is to invert this layer. So that's Control I or Command I, and the image goes back to normal. And you may say to yourself, well, what the hell was the point of that? Right, so now with the image inverted, we're going to apply some blur, and we're going to apply some surface blur. Now you don't want a lot, so you notice in the window you get a nice little preview in inverted colours, admittedly, of what you're going to see in the end result. So keep these low, keep the radius below 10, keep the threshold below 10. Any more than that and it really does start to look horrible. So click OK. This takes a few seconds, even on a reasonably powerful computer. That kind of processing, it really does hammer it. So now that's done. If we turn the layer off, it's not massively obvious on the screen what it's done, but it has defined some of the edges just a little bit more, just brought them out and made them a tiny bit sharper. So now we'll Control Shift and E to collapse all of those layers down into one, and Control S to take it back to Lightroom. Here we are back in Lightroom. As you can see, this is the cleaned up image. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to spend a little while just playing with the colour of this image, playing with the crop, just trying to get it looking in that kind of old film style. Now I'm not going to show that on video because it will take me many hours and many slidings of sliders to get the effect I want, and I'm pretty sure that no one is going to be interested in actually seeing the monkeying around I tend to go through to try and get this image to, or any image, to how I want it. What I'll do is I'll come back in a minute and show you the end result. Back in Lightroom now for this final look at the image. As you can see, I've gone for a square crop. I felt that the normal aspect ratio really didn't do anything to enhance the image. The black borders really weren't helpful in any way. It's better to concentrate on the subject of the whiskey and the JD bottle and the smoke. You'll also note from the sliders on the right hand side that it's been tweaked considerably, probably more than some people would like, but it's getting probably close to what I could considering in my head when I was first conceptualizing the image. So I'm pretty happy with how it's turned out. As I said at the start of this video, this is my first YouTube video on photography. I'd welcome any feedback that anybody would like to give, things I've missed, things you'd like me to talk about, things I didn't talk about at all, which I probably should have done, whether I should do any more, and if I should, subjects you would like me to do. I've enjoyed making it. It's been a long process, but it's been good fun. So hopefully I'll speak to you again soon.